how to help kids learn to control their impulses. Whether they struggle with ADHD, ADD, or just no impulse control, it can be really frustrating when a kid doesn't know how to control their impulses. Frustrating for you as a parent, frustrating for them because they're always getting in trouble, frustrating for their teachers, for their classmates. It can be very frustrating if your kids have a hard time controlling their impulses. So here are my top 6 tips to help your kids learn to control their impulses. I feel like as a parkour coach, this is what I do a lot of the time. I'm just teaching kids to control their body, control their movement, control their impulses, teaching them to think about what they're doing, think before they act, and then act accordingly. So here are some tips that I found to be very helpful for kids. My first tip for helping your kids learn to control their impulses is to teach them to deep breathe. If they're younger, it's not going to be as long of a breath, and when you're first starting, it's also not going to be that long. But maybe even starting with 2-second breaths. Breathe in, 1, 2, breathe out. Breathe in, 1, 2, breathe out. And then as they can handle it, go to 3 seconds, 4 seconds, maybe even if they're older, 5 seconds. Make sure you're only going as long as they are comfortable, so push them just a tiny bit each time. Don't do huge jumps because you want to make sure they're feeling comfortable and this is something that's working well for their mind and their body and they're used to it. But deep breaths can really help kids. Stopping to deep breathe before you do an action. If you have an impulse, take a deep breath. Well, by the time you get done with that deep breath, you probably forgot about the impulse you wanted to do. If you're in school and you're feeling like bothering your friend, take 3 deep breaths. By the time you've done that, you've probably lost the impulse to go poke your friend or you're thinking about something else. It's also really helpful in parkour when you're balancing or trying to do a big jump. It helps you center your body, center your mind, and just be ready, present, and fully there. It actually gets a little extra oxygen to your head, so it makes you smarter for like a little bit. So that is cool. Hey, deep breathe, you're going to get smarter. But it's also just so important. It's a way to cope. It's a way to handle anger. It's a way to handle impulse control. So deep breathing is so valuable for kids. My second tip for helping your kids learn to control their impulses is celebrate when you see them showing control. If you have a child who has very little self-control, you may have to get really, really good about spotting those times and praising them while it's still a positive time. So let's say you're at an event and you're going through the line to serve your food and you notice that for 10 seconds they aren't begging to be first. So before they start their natural tendency to beg or jump around or whatever they do, if you can catch them in that 10 seconds of goodness, thank you so much for waiting patiently. It reinforces in their mind, I'm waiting patiently, and it helps them start controlling those impulses so that next time when they think about maybe poking their neighbor or getting out of line or whatever they normally do, they have that in their mind. And then if you do this again and again and again, they have multiple times in their mind where they got praised when they were patient, and it starts building proof in their mind that it's good to control yourself. This can be really hard to implement when your kid is at school, especially if a lot of their impulse control is happening at school. But if you can offset that by really building them up when they're at home, that can start helping to build that belief in their brain. I can control my body. I do control my impulses, and that can really help them start building that foundation, which they can slowly start implementing at school and when they're away from you. My third tip for helping your kids learn to control their impulses is to watch how you talk to them. If you tell your kid you have ADHD so you can't control yourself, you just gave your kid an excuse to have no control whatsoever, and it's perfectly fine because they got this thing called ADHD. Be very careful in how you talk to your kids. It's okay to acknowledge you have ADHD and that does make it harder for you to focus, but I am here to help you learn how to overcome this challenge. You can talk about struggles they have without giving the complete power to that struggle. You want to be really careful speaking things over your kids like, you just have no impulse control. Speaking that over a kid can be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If they hear that enough, then they can start finding their identity in, I'm someone who doesn't control myself, and so why even try? You're just throwing fuel on the fire of impulse control, and then they're going to get to a point where they don't even care to control their impulse because you told them they don't control impulses. And kids want to belong. They want to feel like they have an identity, and if their identity is no impulse control, they'll rock it. So be very careful how you're talking to your kids. My fourth tip for helping your kids control their impulses is to get them involved in parkour. Whether that's a local gym, if you have that option available, or if it's online classes. But get them involved in parkour to help them develop that mindset of controlling your body, being in control, taking responsibility for your movement, self-assessing, thinking before you act. and help them get that impulse control in a really fun way where they feel like they're playing, but they're actually learning how to control their impulses. If you are interested in introducing your kids to parkour, you can click the link in the description below for our free online intro parkour class, and your kids can start getting a feel for what parkour is and start developing their parkour mindset and the impulse control that comes with that. My 5th tip for helping your kids learn how to control their impulses is teach them to self-assess. If they're struggling with impulse control at school, when they get home each day, you can help them walk through and think through where were times where you did a really good job controlling yourself, and where were times where you didn't do a good job controlling yourself, and then how could you do better next time? At first, this is going to be something you have to walk them through, but eventually this can be something that they can start doing on their own, especially if they're a little older. Just get them into the habit that every day after school, we're going to do a real quick self-assessment, and you're always going to think about something you did good, because it's really important to focus on the positive. But also think about somewhere where you didn't do the best job, and then let's get a plan of action. And my 6th tip for helping your kids learn to control their impulses is help them get enough exercise. If your kids have bottled up energy, sometimes it's practically impossible to control their impulses. But if you're getting outside when it's possible, depending upon where you live, when they're inside cooped up, getting them active with dance videos, games, challenges, things like that, that can really help your kids function better and control their impulses. And when they're functioning better, controlling their impulses, they're starting to build the belief in their mind that they can control their impulses. If all the experience they have is not controlling their impulses, then they start building this belief in their mind based on things they've seen happen that I really have no impulse control. But if you're helping them have regular exercise and get all their energy out, and they're being able to control themselves just a tiny bit better, they can start having more positive experiences where they control themselves, and they can start building a belief in their mind from proof that they've seen in their life that I can control my impulses sometimes. I struggle with it. I'm not perfect at it, but hey, there was a time there and a time there and a time there and a time there that I did control my impulses. So getting plenty of exercise is so important to helping your kids control their impulses, because with all that excess energy out, and now you have the appropriate level of energy, still a lot probably, still not going to be perfect on controlling your impulses, but some of those impulses that would have got you in really bad trouble, maybe those are ones that you can avoid now because you're not just having to flail around all the time. So getting excess energy out is really important in helping your kids be prepared to control their impulses and build proof in their mind that they can control their impulses. You know, if 99% of the time your kid is not able to control their impulses, it's really hard to build a foundation and proof to them that you can control your impulses. But if you can back that up to 80 to 90% that they're not controlling it, you still got 10 to 20% right there that they are controlling their impulses. You can use it as positive proof to them that there are times they're controlling their impulses, and you can build from there. Maybe next time it'll be 25% that they control their impulses, and then in a couple months we can get it to 27%. So it's really important to help your kids as much as you can build that proof in their mind that they can control their impulses. I'd love to hear in the comments below what you've done to help your kids control their impulses. And as always, if you're finding this valuable, if you can hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with a friend, it could help. And don't forget, if you want information on an online free intro parkour class, click the link in the description below.